بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين نبينا وإمامنا وحبيبنا وقدوتنا محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته المخلصين المجاهدين. So today we will have one of these question and answer sessions. So I think the general issue or the general headline will be Aql and Naql. That's reason and revelation. Just to point few points ahead of it. There should not have been any issue really in principle. The issue is fake. And the reason for that, why it developed this way, and then the issue of Aql and Naql, and these two words have been used in Islamic history, and then we come to European history, is that because when Greek philosophical works and mathematical works and other were translated, mostly at the time of early Khilafah Abbasiyya, Ma'mun time, who was very interested. The way it is done systematically, logically, was very impressive for Muslims. And they were, while before that they were having a simple way of thinking, simple way of life, which is aqli, which is proper. We will come to that. But this systematic way, which built things like an evidence way, like a mathematical proof, is very attractive and very enticing. And many, like a small child who grow up and then saw these things were in a state of amazement, they adopted that and thought it is all these studies on these things are really rational, and they call it rational studies, not based on revelation or text of revelation. And the reality is that like the young man or woman coming out of age and starting challenging his parents and so on, because he thinks he knows everything, and later on he will recognize that he lacked the experience and lacked the knowledge, but he needed to enforce himself. So in this youthful attitude, plenty of that what the Greek philosopher did was taken uncritical and regarded as this is our rational studies. Let me give you an example. For example, later, although one of the earliest philosophers, Al-Kindi, was really of the type which was sufficiently critical to the Greek philosophy, and his philosophy is more closer to Islamic philosophy and the proper way of thinking than the later ones. But later on became more and more prevalent. For example, the theory of the so-called reasons. The first reason, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is supposed to be Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the first one, the eternal, the insisted existing, and from that one by flowing out, that's what the so-called active reason has been created or emanated. So you don't know exactly if you should use the word created or emanated. Is it really of a divine essence or a created essence? And then, because they say that the first one, the only one, can only recognize unity. There's no multiplicity. That's the assumption they made. And then from him emanated one, second one. The second one has himself and the first one. So there are two now. Now we have multiplicity. And by looking at himself and his creator or his father, more minds and spirits started emanating, and they are housed in the so-called orbits of the moon, and above them are the orbits. So it's connected to the orbits of the heavenly bodies. You see from modern physics, you know this is all a mythical theory. It has no physical ground whatsoever. The orbit of the moon has a stone, a heavenly body, which is like a stone, has no reason or spirit or nothing else. This is all imagination. It's all coming from old Babylonic paganism, and has been given a philosophical polish and an argument which looks very philosophical. If you look at it now, it is pure myth, has nothing to do with aql. At the time, the people thought it is aql, and they thought the premises are aql. That's the problem. So since that, obviously this structure, this hierarchy of gods and or semi-divine entities contradicts Islamic monotheism clearly. So they said, we have to find a way to interpret Islamic text in a metaphorical way to synchronize with the so-called aql. So that's where the dilemma started. That they made certain assumption, like for example, the simple one, eternal first one, cannot have any multiplicity in itself, including that he cannot conceive or understand anything except himself. This is just an arbitrary assumption. What's the evidence for that? None. It's just an arbitrary claim. That from the one, only one can come out. Who said that? That from the one, only one can out. There's no evidence. There's no rational necessity. It's not like when you say that the first one, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or for the atheist, the universe, is necessarily existing. And necessarily existing must have all needs of and ingredients of its existence in its own being. That's by rational necessity. Otherwise, the word existing does not make any meaning, does not make any sense. So that's by rational necessity that we say the whole is larger, or at least not smaller than the part. It can't be smaller than the part, because sometimes we say the whole, we mean also because we can say something is greater than something, or it's equal, so greater or equal. So taking into consideration that we are sometimes liberal in the word greater, that could be also meaning equal, so we can say that the whole is not smaller than its parts. It's at least equal or bigger, because maybe the whole will contain only one part, so it's equal to its part, but never smaller than its part. It's not part of itself. It's impossible. A genuine part of itself. This is the rational necessity. The moment you explain that to somebody, give a few examples, even if he's illiterate, coming from villages, then he will understand that. Right away, this sack of wheat, is it possible that the whole wheat is smaller than just a portion which you have taken? It's impossible. By immediate rational necessity. These are rational necessities. But that the one can, from the one only one can emanate, is not a rational necessity. There is nothing enforcing that rationally, and we know by necessity that's impossible. Does not make any sense. Does not make any sense. So the suppositions of most of the Greek philosophy in metaphysics are based on certain irrational assumption, not rational, and possibly deduced from paganism and polished and giving philosophical and rational and logical quote.
Could you give a classic example?
I give the example of these reasons emanating one reason, etc. That's the biggest example.
No, but I mean on how that's come into, let's say, Islamic thinking.
Because that's the word Ibn Sina and Al-Farabi. They were subscribing to this theory because they thought it's rational. They thought it's rational. And then prophethood is that what the Naql Fa'al, the active reason, which is the reason in the orbit of the moon, radiates or emanates in the minds of human beings. So revelation is something like an emanation. And since it's an emanation from this entity, you can't by self-training, by rationalization, and maybe by spiritual training, you may become a prophet. So prophethood can be gained. It's not a gift from the divine, which it contradicts Islam clearly, because in Islam Allah is an active agent. He acts on his free will, and he chooses whoever he wants. So this will lead to clear contradictions. Yeah.
So there could be more than one receiver.
Yeah. No. By training you can become a prophet, because just that this active reason radiates knowledge. And if you are trained properly, you will receive that knowledge. That's it. And these prophets have been by and they say because the Prophet was in the cave of Hira, by polishing himself and training himself, and his own makeup is very spiritual and very polished, and his soul is very pure. He was able to get this radiated from the Naql Fa'al. But because he's a human being and made out of flesh and blood, so he can only think in linguistic terms, in finite terms. So all what he utters has to be interpreted metaphorically. So they put things upside down. That's an example. Here the issue of Aql and Naql has come into controversy, and obviously the people of Hadith and the people of Quran did not accept that. And they were not trained, so their answer was that these are philosophical, Aql should not be put ahead of Naql, Naql should be ahead. But this is obviously utter nonsense, because to understand Naql, to understand traditions and Quran, you have to have reasoning, you have to have language. And language is the expression of human rationality. That we are able to talk, and that our talking is making sense, is relying on fundamental principles of reason, which are ingrained and built in the mind. So, being rationally capable is a precondition of understanding revelation. Any being which is rationally capable, not rationally capable, will not be receiving revelation. That's what the fuqaha have said, al-aql manat al-taklif. Rationality, that you have reason, is a necessary condition for you to be addressed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with commandments. Because if you don't have, you cannot be addressed. It's impossible. So if Allah wants to address some creation, He will give them sufficient rationality to understand, and sufficient free will to comply, obviously. Otherwise, it will be creatures who are acting without free will, like the angels, for example, in one theory. So the claim then it will develop further, and then obviously the mutakallimin, the one who maybe in English language we should say the theologian, not the philosopher, the one who trying to defend the Islamic creed using philosophical, and they use also they have quite a number of mistakes there, and there were a criticism to them from people of hadith, but the criticism usually does not stand its ground. It is weak. It is sometimes pointing out that the result is wrong, your premises must be wrong. But the people of hadith and fiqh, they are not skilled in these disciplines, so they do not develop really counter arguments of any value. Few of them did. As-Fara'ini, Al-Amidi, etc. They did. They are people of Sharia and so on. They did develop considerable, and we know that the body they developed is that really the body of Islamic philosophy and theology, which survived, like for example the Kalam argument, which survived until now, adopted by Craig to prove that the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's developed. That's the reason the word Kalam is coming from Arabic. That has survived. All the philosophy of Ibn Sina and Farabi and so on is dead, in the sense it's as dead as the major parts of the metaphysics of Aristotle, and even Europe has recognized that most metaphysical studies are empty of any meaning. They are absurd, they have no meaning. Even Kant claimed, Kant's philosophy is relying on that all metaphysics is just impossible to bring any firm knowledge or any well-established knowledge, because it's based on concepts which are based on the limitation of the human mind. So, and also the positivists nowadays claim that all metaphysics is false, which is again false, going to other extreme.
So you mentioned, like for example, Ahmadi, for example. He obviously used a lot of theology for his own. Yeah, he's a mutakallim and also usul fiqh. Is his usul and his Islamic research, is that considerably better than his contemporaries or the classical works?
Yeah, because he's a distinguished scholar, but he summarized all what the Ash'ari and the Maturidi school have developed, and maybe some of the Ahl Hadith.
Is that because he was much more analytical, because of his rational approach, his philosophy?
Yeah, because the rational approach is that what distinguished him. If it would have been just lining the text up in one row, he would not have become that polished and distinguished. And then Ibn Taymiyyah came later and had quite a number of criticism there of philosophy and logic and formal logic of the Greek, etc. That's all true, and developed further points which are worthy of consideration, which make him really capable of being classified as also a philosopher of world rank, of historic level, and he is definitely mutakallim. Although many of the so-called Salafi, they claim no, he's on the madhab al-Salaf. This is just playing with words, because the way Ibn Taymiyyah articulated it, he articulated the way of mutakallimin. He has certain adoption there which are different than the adoption of the Ash'ari and the Maturidi, and in the Salafi, so-called Salafi, self-pronounced Salafi, claim this is the way of Salaf. This is all, if you check what the Sahaba have said, this has nothing to do with what the Sahaba have said. It is deduced from there by certain rational approaches plus certain assumption, which never even came to the imagination of Sahaba. They never studied it. They were more in the natural, common sense way, not in the sophisticated theological and philosophical way. So this is just hijacking the issue by claiming, because Ibn Taymiyyah always refer to the Salaf, rightly or wrongly. Sometimes they refer to them in a way of intellectual terror, because it's a very easy way to terrorize someone. Say you are against the Salaf, that everyone is terrorized, is afraid. And since he is quite comprehensive in his knowledge about the narrations and the hadith, sciences and so on, much more than the other mutakallimin, because he comes from a Hanbali background, Hanbali school. If you were to come from a Shafi'i, because the Shafi'i background is usually more inclined toward Ash'ari and more toward Ilm al-Kalam, while the Hanbali is less in that, but more hadith and so on. Because he has a considerable amount of hadith knowledge and narration knowledge, he was able again to come forward and enforce himself by using partly intellectual terror means and rhetoric means and so on. But if you look at him fairly, he is no less a mutakallim and no less a philosopher than the other philosophers in Islamic history and mutakallimin.
But someone could argue the only reason he was a philosopher, quote unquote, is because he was speaking out against many of them. As you said, he wrote a lot against the Ash'aris and whatnot. So in order to disprove something, or in order to enter the realm of critique, you have to immerse yourself in that. I don't know if it necessarily classifies you as being one of them to dispute something.
No, I've seen that this should be classified as one of them, because one of them is not bad, is positive. That Salafi claim it is bad because of their deficient mentality, that's all. But it's not bad to be a mutakallim, provided you have proper rationality. Now,
what does that mean, mutakallim?
Mutakallim is the one who is discussing theologist. Because they talk about these things called ilm al-kalam, the knowledge of speech, of talking. This is a convention. While in the Christian tradition, it's called the knowledge about the divine, lahut, theology, knowledge of theos, of God. Here it is knowledge not to serve God, because you may be discussing other issues. But usually related
just to define the certain terms that you go.
That's mutakallim al-ilm al-kalam, the theologian, not the philosopher. So the theologians are supposed to start from a scripture and try to defend the scripture using rational means, and the philosophers are supposed to start from pure reason and follow that line without any hesitation, without bothering what has come from the revelation. In reality, this is this is an approach which will end nowhere. Already Kant and the modern philosopher have proved that pure metaphysics in that sense does not make any sense. There is no way to prove anything. Even to the extent that some modern schools, which they call themselves the positivist schools, they claim every metaphysic is fake, is a myth, does not exist. And the only way to gain knowledge is experience. Yeah, experiment and observation is the only way to get any solid knowledge. And this is obviously a theory which shoots itself in the foot, because you can ask them, you claim the only way to gain knowledge is experience. This statement is a metaphysical statement. Which experiment which proves this general statement? There is none. Or you go into infinite regress. It collapses. Positivism will collapse by necessity of reason. It is not possible to say that all knowledge, without any exception, including the rational necessities, come from experience. That's not possible. There are some knowledges built in the structure of the mind which are ahead of sense experience.
Don't we call it the fitra?
Fitra or necessity of reason, whatever you call it, we are not going to fight. Fitra means the way someone is created. This is the expression used by the Quran, because this is the common man language, which comes. You could say it fitra. It is the ingrained, the built-in rationality of the mind. The way the mind is structured, that it can make conclusions. That's necessary there before you do any experimentation, even before you perceive anything, even before you look at anything. Because to interpret experiments, you have to use certain concepts which are built in the mind. Otherwise, you will go into an infinite regress. So positivism fails.
So then what's the evidence that you have taught concepts? I mean, concepts are a perception of the reality with your five senses.
Yeah.
So that's not...
But to analyze them and putting them and describe them, you have to have the necessity of reason before. There are certain fundamental concepts of the mind built in the mind.
Such as?
Principle of contradiction. Principle of rationality. That everything which is not necessary in itself must have a sufficient reason for its existence or its conclusion. Principle of proof. Why do you need a proof for something that will come from well-established premises to results? But you have to connect them with a certain process of reasoning. Why do we need that? Otherwise, we are not certain that the conclusions are correct unless we have a proof.
It's just like, otherwise, just like an animal consents.
Yeah, animal consent will be just perceiving and instinctively without any rationalization. Yeah. But still, you could say the instinct have certain necessities in them, which is built so that the animal can survive.
But they can't learn.
Yeah, the animals could survive.
Yeah.
Wait for Ismail and have a cut here.
So you can. Do you want a drink? Chef, do you want a drink?
Yeah. Can enter slide it's in. So we'll have a cut. So I have this one.
I'm alright, thanks, man.
Do you want a drink? No one comes in.
So these previous informations will go back to another previous information until it comes to the fundamental things which are built in reason. And these fundamental things, the question is that where they have come from and how are they. It's in the structure of the reason. A materialist will tell you that developed by evolution, because if it is not there in the mind, the evolutionary development of materialist, I mean the atheist, will say developed by necessity of evolution, because anyone doesn't have that built in his rationality or his perception, even an animal, will get extinct quickly. For example, if an animal sees an enemy of itself, for example, a herbivore, a plant eater, he's a carnivore, a meat eater. It will run away. If it doesn't run away, it will be eaten and it will get extinct. So only those who run away recognize the danger and the only conclusion is running away or attack with horns, they will get extinct. They are eaten away and they did not survive over the billions of years which have come. So it has been, according to evolution, has been ingrained like this. Only those who have the right brain or the right instinct survived. But ultimately it goes to experience in that sense, that maybe where the positivists come. But if it is so, then it is not certain, because it's not what happened on Earth. We don't know how it could be in another satellite or other stuff, because there is no other necessary overriding principles. But if we look at our own rationality, we recognize that we are unable to think without these fundamental principles of reason. Otherwise, there is no difference between the mental institution and otherwise.
I agree, but I think that Islam, getting back to the point where Islam accepts them, is that the one, in Aristotle, exactly like you said, with the rational proofs, they stopped with revelation, because obviously there was...
But the problem is, again what many so-called Salafi would neglect and others, is that even revelation starts with reason. That's their problem. They have not recognized it. Because when the messengers come to them saying, worship your Lord, you have only one Lord. When they utter the word, worship your Lord, you have only one Lord, the recipient will understand the meaning of the word worship, the meaning of one, and the meaning of Lord. He has already some prerequisites information fundamentally, and he has that either from experience or from necessity of reason. A Lord is the master who commands and who deserves all respect, etc. These are already there. And he says, no, we have many lords, you are mistaken. And the messenger tell him, who creates the heaven and earth? Are they various creators? If they are various creators, they would split. They would be splitting in kingdom, in the usual argument. This is rationality, so there is no escape. So they claim that Wahi is before Aql, and Aql before Wahi is nonsense. The reason must be there before Wahi has come first. But now, the usual contradictions which people construct there exist only in their mind. It may exist if you have something attributed to revelation which is not revelation, which is a myth. Many people, pagans, would attribute that, for example, to a tradition which has come from previous generations based on the gods communicating with humans. This is a narration which is unreliable, first of all, and second, it can be refuted that a divine entity can be, if you go rationally step by step, a divine entity cannot be multiple after a long chain of arguments. You may perceive it immediately if you are lucky or you have a pure sense of fitra, a clear sense of fitra. This universe is very clearly well connected, everything is tuned nicely. It seems to be, if it have a creator, then the creator will be one. And then you build from there bit by bit the whole theory. That's the reason the Quran says, who created heaven and earth? They admit that because they admit there is a master God, big God, and smaller gods. So if there's a master God who did that, all that, how come that there are smaller gods? What's their function? How do they come in existence? Where are they? They say they are sons and children, for example. But the divine being does not need sons and children because he's without beginning, he's eternal. Only the mortals need sons and children so that the species continue. But from that species, there's only one who is eternal from beginning to end, never ending at beginning. So what's the purpose of procreation? Then you go to a higher level of philosophical in the like we had in the book Tawhid. If he is necessarily existing, meaning he is a simple, non-composed object. Because if it had been composed, meaning it's not necessary. The components need each other. So it must be uncomposed. If it's uncomposed and impossible to divide, how come then an offspring will come? Because offspring, genuine offspring coming from you, is that by the semen fertilizing a woman. So a bit is from you, from the woman. But if you are undividable, nothing can be separated from you, how come that you have offsprings? At the best you can have is adoptive children maybe, but not offsprings. And it's like this, it goes level by level in argument.
But the rational proof, ultimately you're right, I understand exactly what you're saying, but ultimately whether we understand God is there or not, he was there, and rationally, technically, you cannot prove this.
No, it can't be.
How can you rationally prove that?
Oh yeah, we can have a session for that specifically. The various gods proofs is very clear. Very clear. This is the argument of the atheist. This is not correct. The belief in God is not relying on even if we rely on revelation, we must say this is a messenger who come with miracles which cannot be explained in the system of the universe. So it must be a force behind the universe. That's another proof. But this is using the revelation as a fact after proving that it's a revelation, meaning after having the miracles or the evidences of revelation. So you don't need the rational argument in the sense of the philosophical about the necessary existing and kalam. This is a rational argument. But the argument that a man came, Let's assume, for example, because some people who are listening to us, some of them are Christian, a man came in North Palestine around the time of Emperor Tiberius, and assuming the narrations are correct, they can be proven to be correct in the case of Isa by other means, not by their means of their books, because there are issues there, that he did miracles. He revived a dead man who was 10 days or several days in the grave, and starts thinking, according to the witnesses. Let's assume this has happened really. Because in the case of Isa, we don't have this attitude that these things happen, because plenty of fabrication and issues there. But let's assume it has happened here. Then how to explain that? There's no force in the whole universe, and not enough entropy, because if someone dies, he starts disintegrating. All this organized structure is gone. To get that level of organization, all the entropy of the universe and all the energy of the universe is not capable to do it. That's no way to get that organization. In this few seconds where you call them Azar come out, it's not possible to get that like that. You may do a fermentation process in a sea for several billion years and you get something like that, but not in a second. That is not possible. Physically, it's not possible. So it must be a force which is not physical. And we can check all the physical forces, electromagnetic theory. This is based on the experience, because we saw that, assuming we were standing there ourselves, and we saw that. And we checked it in reality. We were there, when the man died, we were there when we say the stench in the grave, all of that is there, and he comes alive out. No, by necessity, that's not possible by any physical means. So it must be a force which is beyond the universe.
Yeah, but that's not the reason.
That's a rational proof.
But that's not intrinsically why you believe. For example, if we were alive in the time of Musa alayhi salam and we parted the sea and he raised the sea in front of us, one man came to me one day and he said, in a question, he said, if God came down, if God really wanted us to believe, why didn't he come down in the form of a man? And I said, and do what? And he said, what if he turned a man's head fully around? Wouldn't you believe then? I said, maybe, maybe not. He said, well, if someone turned someone's head around, you wouldn't believe? I said, Musa led the people through an ocean that was part. I don't think most of us can comprehend what an ocean party would look like.
Yeah.
Especially when you
it was a movie. It was a very interesting movie.
Right. and the people themselves did not believe. So that's proof for it not being a proof itself. For the proof.
No. The people who did not believe, they have problems in their rationalization.
But that's the whole point. The point is that not through rationality will you believe. That's the point. That's precisely the point.
This is the mistake. No. You may believe by imitation, you may believe by indoctrination by your families, but the right way of believing is to base on rationality in the proper sense. I mean, not rationality essentially that what a philosopher do. For example, the one who was with Musa there, one who is rationally sound.
Right.
There, people claim they are divine beings. What is the characteristic of a divine being? That he is not physical, he is transphysical. If it is part of the physical universe, we are not talking about divine being. So that's the first thing we have to get to. At that time, they were not separating the physical universe from the divine beings. The sun is a divine being. You see the point? At the time, there was plenty of confusion about what is a divine being at the time of Musa. But who said that Bani Israel did not believe? They believed that God did that, but they were not clear: is God in form of a cow, or it is in the form of a star? They are not yet advanced in their understanding of Godhead as it should be. We didn't have that understanding.
But they definitely believed it was the act of God.
Some external force did it through Musa. They believe that. There's no doubt about that. That I believe is deficient, need to be polished and further educated. That's another issue. But that an entity did that, it's not Musa, nor his stick. That's more evident. That's what I mean. It's a rational proof. And this will produce necessary knowledge. Many people who were standing with Isa and Alaz, according to the narration, they became believer. They say he's a magician because they were having a misconception that something called witchcraft is capable of reviving the dead. We know that's not possible. Witchcraft will not do that. Witchcraft is mostly impair your mental capability and maybe confuse your vision, but not to that level. Besides, obviously, many things that people call witchcraft is just trickery and so on. We know that. But if we really talk about genuine witchcraft, which can make a man hates his wife and the wife hates her husband, like in Surah Al-Baqarah in Harut and Marut, this is which using maybe some kind of non-physical, maybe spiritual means and so on, it will never revive a dead. That will not happen like that. This is miraculous. This needs a force and capability beyond the universe. So, revelation itself, if it's well established that this man is not talking from him, or if he's receiving the revelation from an over or transnatural source, then we have the first step that a transnatural force, that something beside the universe exists. The moment we have a material or trust natural force there, then we have the first step in establishing that pure atheism is invalid. In time of Musa and Isa, there were other issues with witchcraft, with misunderstanding of religion, which had to be cleared by various evidences. In that, the only thing is that he challenges the magician and defeat him. See, the magician are defeated. I am representing another authority. They are appealing to idols and gods who I claim do not exist. They are just people of trickery. I am appealing to the one who created the universe. And build from there.
Can I ask a question to the brother who asked you a question? If you're saying rationality is not something that can prove that there is a God, what do people basically?
It doesn't produce iman. It is not a kind of proof. It doesn't produce iman. You have iman somewhere from fitrah, from something like that.
Okay, hasn't he got a point there then?
The expression leap of faith.
Yeah.
You have to take a leap of faith still. Though, because you can believe in rational as much as you can, but you still have to take that because it's belief, isn't it?
This is the European concept. No, this is not. There's no leap of faith there. There has to be a valid argument there, convincing for you. It may be a faulty one, like for example, the idol worshipper, which leap of faith. They have no argument for that. For example, I'll give you a story that has happened recently. One Islamic scholar in India, he's living now, a Hindu high personality in the police force, visit him and say, you are supporting terrorism, etc., etc. Say, why? You are criticizing what happened in the Babari Mosque, etc., etc. This is our tradition, this is the place where Ram was born. And the Muslim scholar say, do you really believe that there was someone called Ram that is born there? Say, that's what we did after this. He said, go and research your religion and come with your counter arguments, which you can put as a modern man who watches the television, who listens to radio, and who has internet. And they will bring me my counter evidence about Muhammad. So the Hindu came after a bit of time, few days and weeks, and they said, I checked, it's only based on narration. On narration, there's nothing which proves that historically or any other evidence. It's just books which narrated, and just it could be purely mythical. Say, but Islam is like this, and this is the history, and this is the conquest, and this is the narration, and the man, the high-ranking Hindu, became Muslim. The one who demolished the Babri Mosque was the first one who praised himself to be the first one to put the hammer on the Babri Mosque, converted to Islam recently, after meeting some Muslim scholars and discussing with them. So it is clear that it is a possibility of rational argument. Otherwise, Allah will have no hujjah against His creation. The fitrah alone is not enough. I know that the point of view in Islamic history that they claim it is mithaq al-fitrah enough yawm al-qiyamah, but it's not correct because it will contradict the ayah clearly. وما كنا معذبين حتى نبعث رسولا. Yeah, there's a counter argument that meaning the punishment in dunya. So if his punishment in dunya is not possible unless a messenger has come, then the punishment of akhirah, which is even bigger, for sure, by necessity of reason. If he doesn't punish in dunya, he will not be punishing in akhirah, which is even worse and more miserable than dunya, the punishment. So no, the mithaq al-fitrah is only a gift of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and modern research of the brain, they have designated certain part of the brain, they call it the God complex. Even if that excited by electric currents, the one who is excited reports the feeling of an enormous entity, and they call it the God complex. So there's no other, because if they excite a certain area, you see flashing in front of your eyes because it's connected to the optical nerve. In another area, you hear sounds in your ear, possibly if moderated properly, maybe music. And that place, nothing except that a feeling that is an enormous entity, an overwhelming force about to crush you, so you feel an enormous presence. That's all of it. And they call it the God complex. So that's what you could call it, even physically realized in a part of the brain. I don't care if it's in a part of the brain or not. It's not my job in that. But definitely you have this in the fitrah. So you are only pre-tuned to believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the opposite is difficult. You have to pull yourself, you have to skin yourself to become an atheist, de facto. But you don't need to skin. But this is by the grace of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's very well conceivable that you could create rational beings which are like computers, very cold, having no God complex, and they will be maybe easier accessible to rational arguments than ourselves. Possibly. But what I'm saying is that there might be some argument which the one who receiving it regarded as valid. Or it is by indoctrination and by repeating and brainwashing, which is the majority of human beings are being caught in. Because they start their life in an environment, and that environment, by repeating, and by the small child, by necessarily trusting his own parents, whatever comes from them is taken as a fact. And by repeating that, by seeing the parents going to the idols, let's say Hindu parents, worshipping Shiva, it don't come in his mind that Shiva does not exist, it's just an imagination. How come my parents do that? There must have been some kind of knowledge. But has become like what we call in modern language brainwashed. That's all. No evidence there. The moment evidences are put on the table, and this one is by Allah's grace is the moment of open-mindedness, then he will recognize that there's a real problem and start searching. For example, there was a small piece in a funny one I saw a few days ago. One Christian missionary was, I think it's in America, an affluent family of Muslims, maybe princes or high-ranking business people, because this is like a palace with the surrounding walls, not like the walls we have in the Middle East up to date. It was small walls, but the rest is a metal grid. So he was standing there and talking to all the children. Jesus loves you. So the usual campaigning of the Christian, and he's the Son of God. And then the boy turned away. Said, "Why are you turning away from your Jesus loves you?" Said, "Listen, I'm turning away because I'm God. If Jesus can be God, I could be also God." You see, the boy, because he comes from Islamic background, is trained to be more rational. I'm not saying he's rational, fully rational as it should be. Because with his parents, living in American world, they have to discuss with him. If a human being can be God, Jesus, then why don't you assume I'm God also? I'm also God. So I have the right to turn away. So if that one can be, I can be. What restricts it to Jesus is just an arbitrary restriction. Unless you bring an overwhelming, bone-crushing evidence, you don't have. Just someone came in history and got crucified, became declared to be divine. If he's really divine, I could be divine. In principle, if that's in principle possible, that's in principle. So you see, he did not express it, I'm Christian in his behalf in a sophisticated language. But that's the way his mind worked.
Isn't it ultimately a subjective argument? Because if you come across somebody and you try to prove rationally that God exists and Islam is a true religion, and they don't accept it for whatever reason, then you ultimately think they're deficient. That's what I'm saying. There is an element of faith, though, isn't there? There's
no element of faith. There's an element of just surrender to the argument and respect your own reason. The moment you respect your reason, you are there.
Okay, let's go with this. Okay, I can't prove this for sure, but I can only speak for myself. In that, if someone was to argue with me and say that there is no God, and they started to prove it, let's say they were much more scientifically inclined. So
he can't.
Let's just say he didn't fully, but let's say he got to a certain point. He had some.
He may confuse you.
Like atheists have some sorts of arguments and whatnot. I would come to the point, honestly, not because I've been brainwashed or told over. I come to the point where I'd say, look, I see what this book has said. I look around and I just know that there's a God. There's no way for me to tell you, you're right, you beat me in the science game, I can't come up with enough proofs. Maybe you can, but I couldn't in that position. But what ultimately I think, and what I think a lot of people think, I can't prove a lot of people think this, but I know I do, is that ultimately, I just know, because I just know. I don't know.
Listen, you are bringing a rational argument, but you are doing it in a summary in one sentence. It's a rational argument. I see this book. You're talking about the Quran. Why are you not saying the same about the book of Tolstoy? So this is a distinguished book. It has certain characteristics that make it look quite different than any other book. That is the way rationality works. Rationality doesn't mean it will be 1 + 1 = 2. This is mathematical rationality. But it's not the way all rationality works. There is rationality of other type also. The problem is to think rationality is only the formal logic of A, if A = B and B = C, then A = C. These are limited class of rationalities of very elementary simple statements. You can divide that and go to elementary simple. For example, we look at that book. It mentions we know by historic necessity that it came from a illiterate man. Even if he was hiding and cheating the people that he's illiterate, he was in Mecca, which is relatively backward to the rest of the world. Now look at this, the level of culture and civilization there. It is so high compared to his time, it is impossible for a human being to jump out of his, because we know if there's no God, then he's imprisoned in his. That's the reason, for example, the Russian encyclopedia in the 30s and 20s stated categorically that the Quran contained parts and elements which have been written in the 8th Islamic century, because they must be, according to the development of history and materialistic development, must be written in the 8th century. You can only laugh because we have copies of the Quran who are at least from the 2nd century, or the first century even if we say Uthman fabricated it. So how can Uthman fabricate something 7 centuries ahead of his time and development? You can expand the argument, you feel it immediately by seeing it, but that you perceive it, like for example...
But detach the proof of God from the Quran. I mean, detach the proof of Allah from the proof of Quran.
Not from the Quran, by the existence of the Quran. From the Quran will be contradictory.
Existence without... I mean, as an individual...
It's possible. I say there are various avenues. It's nothing so numerous like... For example, you could say, I started to exist, so I'm not necessary. We came to the conclusion that this universe must have come somewhere, or it is eternal, meaning it is necessary in itself. It does not need a creator. Okay, let me look at myself. Yeah. I'm definitely not eternal or necessarily existing, and I can distinguish myself clearly from the rest of the universe. So in that universe,
some people think like that. Some people honestly think to themselves that I am a part of evolution, and it's an ongoing process. There is absolutely no God.
No. They're stopping there in the wrong thing. Okay, going back to my parents.
For you, it's wrong. For them, it's right.
No. It's wrong. It's wrong. Even on the ground, and go back up to the first cell in the ocean. There are certain initial conditions which were right in the ocean at that time. Okay? So that life emerged here and did not emerge in the moon. Okay? And the earth emerged 4 billion years, 6 billion years back. It's not an eternal entity, so it has an origin. Okay, there must have been various phases in star development, and we are in the 3rd phase because you need these heavy materials. They must be manufactured inside supernova. I know all of that as a physicist. That's not a problem. We go there. And then we go to the Big Bang or whatever the start. Even if it's not a Big Bang, we don't need to know the details. Then we have physical laws and initial conditions, which are independent from physical. That's the problem. We are stuck again with the problem of rationality. These initial conditions, or initial boundary conditions, are completely independent from the equations. So where they have come from? Now we assume the equation look mathematical, they look like necessary in itself. Almost not true, because they
came from another initial set of conditions.
It's like they can't go ad infinitum. That's not an explanation. This will be infinite regress.
Is infinitum an option?
An infinite regress? No, it's not an option. It is not an explanation. It must end somewhere to a final explanation. Otherwise, the reason is gone. Then everything is rational and irrational at the same time. Then he must admit that there's no difference between him and someone in the mental institution. That's fine. If he admits that he's mental, fine. You are mental. Alhamdulillah, I am not mental. I'm not going to give up my reason because you are happy to be mental. No, it doesn't work. The people stop there where they should not have stopped, by hijacking the issue. If you go the issue properly, it's going to work properly. But the people stop there because it's convenient to stop there. Life emerged in the ocean, we don't need a creator. But how come the ocean were in that condition, the right time, in that right time? Because the previous conditions, fine, let us go back. Now the sun and the earth are definitely not the first generation stars, by the way. It can't be, because the first generation stars are purely hydrogen stars. They have to collapse in supernovas, produce some heavy materials, eject in space. New stars are condensed. Even the second generation is not enough. There is not enough heavy materials. Only the 3rd generation is maybe capable of enough heavy materials that life could emerge, because life cannot be based on hydrogen, helium alone, so it needs heavy materials. Okay? Even that, it is not going to solve the problem. The problem is there. It will prosecute you up to the first point until you admit the initial conditions is independent by necessity, as you know from the equation. So someone has set the initial conditions first and shows the equation, because actually is not the only set of equations for a possible imaginary universe. We could imagine another universe with another number of dimensionality, with another number of equations, which we may have no concept in our mind how it looks like. But it could exist mathematically, and then it needs also its initial conditions, rightly. But this one is chosen. So he shows a set of equations and a set of initial conditions. That chosen is the eternal, the necessarily existing one. Fine, we ended there. He is not. Then we have to go the one before him, and we have to end by one. And infinite regress is not a solution. Infinite regress is just a fake imagination of the mind, because you have to have an ultimate reason. If there is no ultimate reason, meaning you are closing the circle. But closing it infinity, playing with it. You know how mathematicians sometimes play the game in integration. They close the circle in infinity. Is essentially if you get to infinity, you are getting infinity back to the finite and mapping it on a finite circle. And if you map it on a finite circle, you immediately see what is the trick. The trick is exactly what, if you go to the infinite regressive research, you say A created B and B created A. But to cheat yourself, you put so many in between, hoping that you will forget that there's a close gap there. It doesn't work. A create B, B create A is utterly impossible. It's contradictory. The same with the infinite regress. But the cheating is that you say it goes ad infinitum. Don't cheat me. It has to close somewhere. And it closing itself create a contradiction. Now, this is all tricks. If you look at the atheist, they actually don't have a proof that there is no God. What they have is say that your proof is faulty. Their usual argument is that your proof is you cannot prove. Denying the proof. They have never any proof on the table. The proof on the table will be to show there are a set of mathematical equations which can produce a universe self-contained with no initial conditions or boundary conditions by themselves. And even that, this will be also not convincing because they have to prove that no other, for example, there are mathematical and physical proofs that a space-time of dimensionality 3, because space-time is 4-dimensional, yeah? And a parallel space-time of dimensionality 3 is unstable. It can't produce a universe. That can be proven mathematically. It's impossible. But from 4 upwards, it can go up to 11 dimensions. But the other dimensions where they are, they can be assumed to be compactified away in subnuclear level. It's possible to formulate that. You cannot imagine it with your mind or vision capabilities. Impossible. But it's possible to represent it mathematically and work it. And physicists are working by it, by the way. The most modern theories about the universe is that either supergravity, which cannot be having any solution in a reasonable resemblance of the existing universe, and unless we assume there are other dimensions which have been compactified away. They are hidden away from us. But they do exist in the equation, but they are shrunk down to a very small size. You will not get to see them until you go into the depth of matter. Or supersymmetric string theories. They also need extra dimensions, usually 10 or 11. But there are possibility also that a theory could exist in 17, I don't remember now the number, don't name that. I'm a long time away from physics, but 17 dimensions plus. So that would lead to a universe which has another vastly. So if we have two, and both of them are sick in the sense that they have also initial conditions we have to be successful. But assume we develop the theory which has none. If we have two different theories, then we have the problem. How come this is one realized and not? It's not necessarily existing being. That's a possibility and that's a possibility. Why is this one there and this one did not realize? But even if you have no initial conditions, you have to have a proof to prove that there is no God. That is the only theory, and no theory whatsoever otherwise exists. This is impossible. So all what they say, your proof is faulty, your proof is deficient. No, my proof is not faulty. My proof is solid. My proof is not. If it is complex mathematically and complex rationally, then let us go to a simpler one.
So whoever asks the question about can you prove God, you should always reply by saying, well, where's your proof to disprove God?
Yeah, that's one.
No, that won't work.
Yeah,
that won't work because they'll say you can never disprove a negative.
So how do I mean...
We have the Kalam argument, we have the argument about contingency, we have also modified arguments about morality, like the Kant argument, although I don't subscribe to that. We have the argument from the free will, is that without a free choosing ultimate agent, free will will not be defined at all. The universe cannot have any traces of free will. So your free will is imaginary. So that we are discussing, or not discussing, is just happening because some atoms have interacted such a way that we meet together. We thought we met by our own will, but we are just brainwashed by the reality. The reality is cheating us. So it is irrelevant if we exist or not. We are just machines.
So why
not bother?
So what if he says okay? So what if he says okay?
Okay, that's fine.
But
you are a machine. You are a machine.
But that in itself is not a proof, you'll say, for God.
There's not a proof. No, it says this is an example.
Oh, okay.
We have many proofs, so it's a mistake to think there's only one proof.
Okay.
There's many proofs. And then we have from prophethood, we have physically, historically facts that, as I said, unfortunately, the miracles of previous prophets have been extinct historically, and they are not right. But even in the case of Isa, I would argue that, yes, the existing cosmos in our hand is faulty. I agree with you. But let us think rationally and honestly. A man comes there, maybe he's a revolutionary as they claim, he wants kingdom for himself, and he got crucified. There are thousands like that in history. Hundreds of thousands of rebels of various types. and they all disappeared. Nobody attributed them any divinity or any relation to the divine. Let's assume we are not subscribing necessarily that he's a divine being, because not all Christians subscribe to that. It's only the main church which enforced itself by burning everyone else and destroying. But there were many monotheists until the time of the advent of Islam, and then they were absorbed in Islam. There were plenty of monotheists, especially the one who ran away from the Roman Empire, who adopted Trinitarian theology and the claim that Jesus is the Son, genuine, physical, in some sense, physical Son of God. But there were other schools. But they are all agreed that he has a very close relation to the divine, that he was supported with miracles. Now we think some rebels or some odd guys will come there and get crucified, truly or not, maybe his name like or alike was crucified. All these 5 points are not detailed. And this has all hijacked so many people, and they were thrown to lions, and all that persecution has no historical root whatsoever. It's purely imaginary. This is really a tall order. Even the case of Jesus, even if all these narrations are very faulty and bad, there must be some historic core which distinguish this man from the hundreds and thousands in his time which were crucified, and the 100,000 all over history which have been. And this is still within history which is reasonably a record. We know the time of Tiberius, we know that time sufficiently. Yes, history did not keep much about Isa, I agree. And what they have, the Christians have kept, is quite faulty and full of gaps, but ultimately something odd about this man must be there.
But some would argue that the Romans used Christianity to popularize the empire.
No, this is wrong. This is later, but not here.
But that's when it actually gained traction.
That's just hijacking history.
But somebody could argue that.
No, it can't be. This will be a raping history, because early Christianity was so repugnant to the Romans. They were fighting against so ferociously. There were persecution at the time of Nero. There were conflict between Jews who embraced Christianity, whatever kind of Christianity they embraced, we don't know exactly, and Jews who did not, and they have a fitna in Rome. And the result was that Nero, or the one period before him, expelled them out of Rome because of that. Prohibited them from living in Rome. And there's historic record that there was what they call it? There was a fitna, I think, what they call it, like an upheaval or a conflict, forcing the emperor to kick them out of Rome altogether, because they were very disturbing, and say the reason of that is a man called Christus. That's all what was recorded in history. We don't know this man called Christus. Is it Christus, Christ, what we know? Or it is a real man with the name Christus, what's it? But from historic circumstances, we must assume that there was a conflict between the Jews about the Christ, the new Christ. And the Roman emperor was so fed up that they kicked him out of Rome. Then I think Nero, that's the one before Nero. Who was before Nero? I don't know. Nero got them back, and then in the issues related to the fire of Rome and so on, he threw them to the lions. Then two emperors later, they were again prosecuted relatively mildly. At the time of Trajan, there was a very heavy persecution and executions. So that the Roman, someone could say,
Paul spread in Europe and the spread in Byzantium.
That's later. That's much later.
That's the core of.
Oh, that's better. What you're talking about.
We're talking about now. It's the legacy of that.
Yeah, no. But we are talking about the initial historic situation. Yeah. It was very repugnant for the Romans. They use the same terms they're using now against Muslims. These are human haters. This is a hate philosophy, and even they have many depictions of a donkey crucified donkey, assuming that Isa is a donkey. All of this is full in historical records. They were prosecuted very viciously.
I recently had a debate with somebody, Muslim. He's now adopting ideas of sort of epistemology, and he was going down the lines of everything is essentially relative. So if you have a debate with a non-Muslim about the proof of God, I mean, I pretty much gave the same argument, which was, basically everything can't go on forever, and there has to be an ultimate limit. Yeah. And he was saying, well, that's subjective to how you perceive things, the way and how the constructs of your mind, the kind of frameworks that you use.
That's the only thing we have. So
he was saying, for you it's a truth, and for them it's a truth. Therefore, there is no such thing as. I mean, is there such thing as ultimate truth?
Yeah, that's what the ultimate.
Yeah, but what he's saying is perception. So, I mean, the thing is that how do you break the argument down about epistemology and the whole thing?
No, this is not argument. This is the fake argument. The same argument of the positivist. He claims it's ultimate. He claims there is no what his claim, which that's formula. There is no ultimate truth. But this his claim He claiming this claim is an ultimate truth. He's contradicting himself. He's making a general statement. Every statement is relative. So your statement is also relative.
Yeah.
So if he says there is no ultimate truth,
No, well,
then his claim is wrong, because his claim is not an ultimate truth.
No, but he's saying is that there is not. He goes, the truth is what's in your mind.
When he claimed that the truth, his claim that the truth is in your mind is itself in his mind. It doesn't work. You have to go. You have to go to fundamental points. There's no way. All of these arguments have been discussed even by Plato and Aristotle long ago, but they were unfortunately extinct for when Hobbes what's the name of the atheist?
David Hume.
Hume and so on started that and then people got indulged in that, and they find taste in it because they recognize that what the church is offering is not rational, and they wanted to get out. But the other alternative would have been Islam. Islam is the enemy for a century, for a millennium roughly. You don't go to the enemy for a millennium. So where to go? To what they call reason, and they brought all of these statements of this type. But ultimately, you have to ultimate fundamental statements. You go back to them. There is no escape. Any other meaning, there is no reason, and then welcome to the mental institution. That's fine. Then you must admit that you are mental. So whatever you're saying is just blabbering. There's no difference between saying this is the ultimate truth and saying my mother is a donkey. This is the same. The statement is the same like this. It doesn't make any sense. Even the word donkey doesn't make any sense. Even I could point to a lion and say this is a donkey, and nobody can refute me.
Just
because a lion is the same like donkey, but it's not the same like donkey. Contradiction are possible. That's not a problem.
You become a skeptic in here.
Yes, become absolutely skeptic, and this is a situation in which you are in a state of mental disease. You have to wait until it goes. It passes, but everyone. Sometimes it passes.
So
everyone will pass in that phase.
Are you saying everybody who doesn't believe in God is mentally deficient?
Oh yeah, definitely. He did not do his job properly.
Every single person. Or about Islam, if nobody believes in it.
Also, he did not do his homework properly. If he has done his homework
properly. So about
properly.
a Muslim who believes in Islam without doing his homework properly?
Yeah, no problem with him. I'm not discussing about his time.
I'm just saying.
He is lucky that he has the truth, but it does not mean that he will stand. that he will stand. No, he is lucky, but does not mean that he will stand any argument that he has to build himself. Such a person should avoid going in such debate because he's not qualified. He said, I'm not qualified. I got it from my parents. I'm very happy with it.
Well, I think what he's asking is a Muslim who accepts Islam but is not practicing. Is he also?
No, that's not what I mean.
No, I'm just saying if
he's sinful, he's deficient. Obviously, he does not get his will. Like the medical doctor who advised you not to smoke and himself is smoking. It's the same. We have all these human weaknesses. That's the meaning of having free will. If the free will will be mechanical, we will be angels.
Well, I'm asking, are you saying, is it incorrect to believe in the religion without going through this rigorous, rational understanding?
Yes, correct, but this is not the right way. This is not the proper way for the people who are hearing in the debate and in carrying da'wah. The common people.
No, what I'm saying is for people like, say, generally people who are born into the religion, should they go through this rational? They
should be educated. They should be educated, and their parents. That is their parents' responsibility.
Am I right in saying that Allah obliges you? Because if you read the Quran, Allah is asking you to reflect.
Yeah, to reflect and to think. Yeah.
So is that an obligation, or is that just?
No, it's an obligation. It's an obligation to look in the heavens and the earth, etc. But unfortunately, it's widely neglected. If it is neglected by the scholars, then the people who follow, so the guilty one are the scholars, because many scholars have regarded that as superficial, are not needed, although the argument can be streamlined very nicely for the common people.
So isn't that lack of naql, essentially?
Yeah, and lack of sincerity, but it's not only that what the scholars neglecting. Like, for example, I was discussing with someone today, and in Mauritius, for example, Muslims were ignored for a long time. Until recently, some da'iyah have started coming, but earlier they used to have da'iyah coming from Pakistan. Mashayikh and so on, mostly bravely to collect money, most likely, as you know, you may have seen. And they thunder against, for example, women having lipstick or having short hair, which is a matter of contention. It's an issue, fiqh issue, which is most likely the argument is against them. But they never objected to the woman not having the proper Islamic dress, which is a wajib by agreement of all scholars. There has no disagreement between scholars of Islam in all the earlier generation except the issues about the face and the hands and the feet. Otherwise, the rest of the body is agreed upon by necessity of Islamic ijma' as being awra. But they never address. The women are having exposed hair and everything. And they are very unhappy if she having short hair or having lipsticks, which is most likely desirable for the lipstick at sea.
So bringing the conversation back, if you guys don't mind, just to the reason and the logic.
So that's the kind of mashayikh we have, the kind of mawlanas for centuries like that. Do you know that some scholars in time past said that within a traveling distance of 3 days, they regard the traveling distance to start the 3 days, there must be a scholar who is able to refute every wrong ideology in the world. Otherwise, the whole ummah is sinful, because it's fard ala kifaya. You must have within a travel distance someone who knows all the arguments of the kuffar all over the world and know to refute them one by one. Otherwise, the ummah is sinful.
Wow, that's quite good.
Where is that nowadays? If we have, for example, like may Allah have mercy on him, Bin Baz 30 or 40 years ago declaring that whoever says the earth moves or the sun moves or something is a kafir. That's the kind of scholar we have.
But it wasn't his fault because he was blind, so he had argument.
If he is blind, he should say, I don't see that, but he thought that's what the Quran dictates, which shows how faulty and how superficial is his understanding.
But the fact that he was blind makes him correct and makes us wrong. Because
he could have asked it, because many people who are his admirers and his students and his followers have had their background in physics and chemistry as well. He could have asked.
Okay, while we're here,
why didn't he take example from Imam Malik? Imam Malik received someone from Andalusia about easily 20 to 30 days travel. Yeah, the distance is about 20 days between Medina and Andalusia, maybe 30 days travel and coming back at that time. And someone came with difficult. The people in Andalusia regard it as difficult question. Fiqh question, nothing philosophical, nothing about the moon or the sun or rotation or eclipse. Came to him in Medina and came back with a very meager harvest. I think he answered him 4 or 5 questions or 6 questions, and he came back with something 30 plus, in which Malik said, I don't know. He said, should I tell the people in Andalusia? He said, tell them. Malik said, I don't know. Simple as that. I don't know. For God's sake. That's it. Finish. Maybe someone else is knowledgeable. Go and check the other people.
But while we're on this issue of Sharia, going back to the main issue, imagine you're in Islam now. Okay, we have to use ration to get to Islam and believe that Islam is right and follow the Quran. But now, when we've got the Quran and we're Muslims, do we stop using our ration?
No,
because now we have to judge by other than.
The one who stops using his ration is either mentally deranged or a donkey. No, you use your ration. For example, if you read an ayah of the Quran, you have to understand the meaning. You have to put it in context with all other ayahs. Like, for example, let me give you an example from the Book of Tawheed, an outrageous example. Some people, because it fits their madhab, they read about Lat, Uzza and Manat. The Quranic text is very clear. If you read the surah from beginning to end, especially Surah Najm, it is clear talking about 3 female deities. And they are supposed to be female, according to the Quran clearly, and supposed to be related to the angels somehow. Yeah? Surah Al-Najm. Read Surah Al-Najm for yourself. And then there is a narration from Ibn Abbas, narrating an Arab myth. It's not narrated to the Prophet ﷺ, not lifted to the Messenger of Allah. So it has no credibility. And Ibn Abbas is trustworthy narrator. He's telling you what the Arabs, what he heard from the Arabs. He's not lying. I'm not saying Ibn Abbas is lying. God forbid. He's an excellent man in narration and memorization. But he told me what he heard from the people, because he did not say he see this man. There was a man who was doing lat, doing sawiq, some kind of drink or some kind of something made out of dough, and the verb is called latta. If you do dough and do like this to make it like naan, this is called latta. Latta wa ajana. Kneading the dough and latta, spreading it or something else, and then processing it into sawiq. And the myth goes that this man, this sawiq was so blessed that the Haji who passed there and take from him for free, he was doing that as a charity for the Haji, they immediately become fat. And just making it in a joking, become immediately fat. So it's a miraculous. And the man died. They believed in him, worshipped his grave, and he became a lat, because lat. Now, for God's sake, this is the man. And these are female deities. This is a good man. Ibn Abbas did not tell them what happened to the man, but they believed in him. Maybe they believed the Lat loved him and married him and they mixed with him and he became divine. That's possible, because that's what the Christian believe, that the Son of God, which is really the Christ, merged with the body of Christ, either inserted in it or merged with it completely in the two theories, insertion or mixture, and the whole entity which was walking on earth is a divine being then. Because otherwise the issue of sacrifice does not make any sense. If the one who is sacrificed and also is the purely human Isa, then what is the big fuss about sacrificing the Son of God? Son of God is the Christ, is the spiritual entity, the heavenly entity, which was mixed with the body. So maybe they believed that. He did not tell anything about that. But because they believed things about worshipping graves, which we will discuss inshallah once in a halaqah for itself, in a session for itself, worshipping grave, they took that as an evidence and they just took the rest of the Quran and threw it out of the window, as if it is not there. Then tell me, is one treating the Quran this way having any brain in his head? Maybe he's just an empty drum here. How can we throw all the ayahs of the Quran about angels being believed by the kuffar to be the daughters of God, being divine entities, throw that all away because of one Arabic myth called Allah? I'm not even demanding that they read history and know that Allah exists in the myths of the Arabs and the myth of the Chaldeans and the myth of the Semites, maybe 3,000-4,000 years before Islam. So it's a very old entity. It has nothing to do with someone making sawiq for the Hajj. Even it exists before Ibrahim, before even Hajj was established in Mecca. So how come this myth is accepted as someone, and someone claims this is a proper understanding of the Quran? So you have to have your brain always sitting here, not outside, and working properly. You have to use caution. But in that case, this is the truth word of God, that Allah does not tell lie by necessity of reason. Otherwise reason will be void and making no sense. And this is truthful. Now with a proper understanding, proper synchronizing the ayahs together, proper synchronizing the hadith with the ayah, proper synchronizing that with history properly, that's a very demanding rational work.
Okay, there's
you see what I mean? That's it. So rationality is there.
There's the hadith in Bukhari that talks about if it wasn't for Bani Israel, meat wouldn't rot. Yeah. And I was discussing that with someone, and he said, "Look, brother, don't use ration in Islam. Just follow revelation only. Don't think." Because I know you'll say you said you would reject that hadith, or you'll try and
I would tell you, this one is not following revelation. He is contradicting revelation. Because revelation asks him to think and analyze. And this is the hadith in Bukhari. I followed this hadith specifically. I checked it. You will find people telling you it's maybe Hammam or Wahab ibn Munabbih who made a mistake and attributed to Abu Hurairah. But it's not correct. To be correct and honest, to Abu Munabbih is not only narrated by Wahab and Hammam ibn Munabbih, it's narrated by 7 or 8 compilers of Abu Hurairah. So where is the mistake coming from? It must be from Abu Hurairah. So we have to conclude Abu Hurairah is mistaken, is confused in that specific hadith. In general, he is not confused. This is not proper to attribute confusion or mistake to a narrator without evidence. The evidence for that is that the Quran says clearly.
Sorry, can I just say the hadith in general, so at least people...
Yeah, the hadith in Bukhari.
I'm not in the
according to formalities of hadith, is authentic up to Abu Hurairah.
There's a hadith that says...
Abu Hurairah says,
There's a hadith that says, it's in Bukhari, that says, if it wasn't for the children of Israel, meat would never rot. Because what happened was the children of Israel, they were like greedy people. They used to conserve food and not give it to the poor. So they used to keep all the food. So
punished them by making the food become rotten.
So the meat started to rot. But prior to that, human beings, you could have a piece of meat, a big lump of steak, leave it outside in the desert for a year, and it would never rot.
Right.
But as a punishment, Bani Israel doing what they did, hoarding, then suddenly that period of time after, meat now disintegrates and it starts to rot.
So,
but this is hang on, let him ask a question.
So prior to Bani Israel, all the dead bodies of animals and humans should be properly preserved.
So you see where is the fault, because the Quran says clearly that one prophet after Noah, the people who are arguing with him say, after we have been turned into dust and rotted away in our graves, we are going to resurrect it. And this is well before Bani Israel. So it is clear, you see clearly, this can't be true. It could be interpreted metaphorically that people in the past were not conserving meat,
but it was
not rotting because they were not stingy. Yeah.
But the hadith, I think, only speaks about man wa salwa, the special food that they used to receive from the bird.
No, it's not about meat. No, the hadith said the meat was not meat. This is not about meat. Wouldn't rot. And also, and the same hadith, and where we meat. No, what we say shows even worse. And where it not, and
meat that you eat, I'm guessing.
And were it not for Hawa, Eve, a female will never betray her husband. See, so it is even worse now. The reality is that this most likely a Jewish myth, and then it
was not for Eve. A wife would never.
A female will never betray her man or husband or something. This is nothing than Jewish myths. It's very clear because we have in Islamic tradition nothing. There's no betrayal of Hawa to Allah, neither in sexual sense.
Not in the Quran.
In this wrong hadith. So it's a mistake by Abu Hurairah. Is most likely.
To further this exact point.
So this is not wahi. He's saying what you're head about wahi. He's mistaken. This is a hadith which ended with one Sahabi, and there is good reason to assume that he's mistaken. That does not mean that he's mistaken every hadith, nor in any other hadith without evidence.
Okay, that's a good point. But